I don't know, a few million, 600,000 men, so you can figure out how many people that is altogether, who are looking for love in all the wrong places. No, looking for food. Food you don't have to worry about. That's the magic of that whole 40 years. This is a unique time in history, in spiritual history. You get 40 years of, you get to be a baby for 40 years. That's why they were called the children of Israel. They get to be a baby for 40 years. They don't have to worry about making food. It arrives every day in the form of manna. It says in the Torah their clothes didn't wear out. Their shoes didn't wear out for 40 years. The only bad part was there were no shopping opportunities for 40 years. You didn't have to go buy anything. But you got taken care of. But first, they needed to find, who are we? Other than a bunch of ex-slaves, who are we? It was the moment of revelation of the Torah that told them who they were. It was that moment, and from that moment on in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, that we are called Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, the people of Israel. Before that, we were just the descendants of Jacob and a bunch of anybody else who wanted to come along. It literally says, just like our congregation today, literally says it was an erev rav, a mixed multitude. Anybody who wanted to be together, who was willing to follow Moses and get out of slavery and think this is probably a bad place to be, hanging out in Egypt, let's go off and search out the promised land, which is sort of everybody's quest. This is about everybody's quest for finding meaning in life. And the Torah is our symbol of finding meaning in life. That's what this is about. And so this holiday of Shavuot, in particular, is the sort of culmination spiritually of this path from Passover, wandering, and then standing at Mount Sinai, and then the revelation at Mount Sinai. Our ark is not about Mount Sinai, but can you tell what our ark is designed to be? What's it look like? Burning bush. Looks like a tree. Could be the tree of life. It's the burning bush. The light, the burning bush. And the Torah is behind in that burning bush as a symbol of a kind of opaque and then clear, a symbol of revelation, the emergence of revelation, because that's what we celebrate when we have every Shabbat, not just on Shavuot, on this festival, we celebrate revelation. And we recognize that in a minute when we turn to the Torah and we say the blessings, if you're going to be called up for a blessing over the Torah, one of the things that, if you do the blessing in Hebrew, one of the phrases of the blessings over the Torah is Notein HaTorah. That's the end of one of them. We talk about God, Notein HaTorah, as the giver of the Torah. For those Hebrew scholars amongst us, it's Notein HaTorah, who gives the Torah, and not Natan HaTorah, which would have been past tense. Here we are 3,000 years later. The Torah is 3,000 years old. But we don't use a blessing that's thanks God for having given the Torah 3,000 years ago, even though that's what happened, because in our spiritual time, all of us, we are still getting the Torah every day. That's the real challenge. It's not to look at this as some old funky scroll. Oh, it's got all this Hebrew writing on it from 3,000 years ago that I can't even understand, so what's the point and who cares? Some ancient text that probably ought to be in the library with all those other ancient Near Eastern texts in Akkadian and Ugaritic and all those other cool languages that used to be floating around the Middle East, and this one was in ancient biblical Hebrew. But instead, the rabbinic tradition, the Jewish tradition, says, no, this is in the process of always being given. And the way it's always being given, you're going to hear today when Jeffrey shares a little bit about it himself. It's always being given because even though these words never change, it's kind of the spiritual magic of it all. Every Torah scroll is exactly the same, copied carefully by hand, by a scribe, on parchment, one letter at a time. It takes a year to write a Torah scroll. They never change. It's exactly copied the same. You're literally reading a 3,000-year-old, 5 3,000-year-old books in there. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. 5 3,000-year-old books. And yet, every time you read it, it's different because you're different. Because we're reading it in the context of now 2009 in this world. And we see it through the lenses of our life experiences. And somehow, magically, as a result, the power of the Torah is that when it says, love your neighbor as yourself, we're still trying to do that. When it says, don't murder, obviously, we're still trying to do that. When it says, don't steal, and don't lie, and don't commit adultery, those commandments, the 10 Commandments, which is what we read today as a special reading because of this holiday, the giving of the Torah, when it says you should treat the stranger in your midst as the homeborn, I think that's one of the biggest issues in Congress today. What do we do about immigration? What do we do about the strangers in our midst? We're still wrestling with how do you treat strangers and who's the stranger and how do you become not a stranger? How long do you have to be here before you're not a stranger anymore? Everybody here was a stranger at one time. We're all strangers. That's what the Torah teaches. The Torah has that one phrase, by the way, that you should remember that you were strangers in the land of Egypt more than any other phrase. 36 times it says, remember that you were strangers in the land of Egypt, so you know the heart of the stranger throughout the Torah. Because the more things change, the more they stay the same. And because we may have different looking clothing and we have maybe cooler looking buildings and we may have, the newest new high-tech things and lots of new different stuff, but human beings are fundamentally the same. And that's what makes the Torah so powerful. It speaks to the human heart and the human soul that is the same, wrestling with the same issues, trying to find a sense of meaning and purpose in life, trying to say, who am I and where do I fit? Just as all of the biblical characters did. Fought with their own families, trying to figure out who's who. And what are the rules that we can create that will bring a sense of holiness, order and holiness into our world? And that's what we're still trying to do thousands of years later, and that's why it's not just an ancient book sitting in the library, but it's a living Torah that we take out every week and say, what can I learn from this? How can this touch me? And those are the questions we challenge our bar and bat mitzvahs with, and those are the questions we challenge ourselves with every day. How can I take the wisdom of the past and make it meaningful today for me? Okay, I don't know how I got on that, but I did. So, we're going to turn to the Torah. That's enough introduction of that, but it's going to be the 10 Commandments. And if you can all think about your favorite 10 Commandment and that you keep, the favorite one that you keep, and how it's still relevant today. If you're going to be called up for a blessing, again, let me just point out one thing. This is a Reconstructionist congregation. It's one of the streams of Jewish life, and one of the things that distinguishes Reconstructionist Judaism from other streams of Jewish life is that long ago, excuse me, we rejected the idea of exclusive chosenness of the Jewish people. And instead, we teach that all people choose their own unique paths to answering the same ultimate questions of life. We do it in our way as a result of our 3,000 or 4,000 years of history. Other people do it in theirs. One way isn't right and all the others wrong. If that were the case, then most people in the world would always be wrong.
Where's the